So before we begin reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we always recite one prayer. So you can please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
So the title of this chapter is The Son of Drona Punished. And it's actually a very long chapter. So I was thinking that we can start with where the story begins. Although the part before that is very, very nice. So in our own meantime, we can read that. But for our own reading today, we can start with this. And we'll all take turns reading the verses since we are a small group today. We can make it more interactive. And so if you like, you can turn on your videos or you can keep them off, but make sure you have a book or some screen where you can read the verse. So for the first verse, we'll recite the Sanskrit. If you like, you can repeat after me. Parikshitor thara jarsher janma karma vilapanam
Jamma Karma Vilapanam.
Sanstham cha Panduputranam
Samstastam cha Pranduputranam.
Shri Krishna Kathodayam
Vakshe Krishna Kathodayam.
Parikshitoth Rajarshir
Parikshitodarajarshe.
Makarma Vilapanam
Janma Karma Vilapanam.
Sanstham cha Panduputranam
Samstatam cha Panduputranam.
Akshay Krishna Kathodayam.
Vakshe Krishna Kathodayam.
So translation. So I'll actually go back to the previous screen.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, is it first canto?
Yes, this is first canto, chapter 7.
Okay.
First canto, chapter 7.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Suta Goswami thus addressed the rishis headed by Shonaka. Now I shall begin the transcendental narration of Lord Shri Krishna and the topics of the birth, activities, and deliverance of King Parikshit, the sage amongst kings, as well as the topics of the renunciation of the worldly order by the sons of Pandu. So now Suta Goswami, he'll begin narrating the story of Maharaj Parikshit himself. So Suta Goswami is relating the conversation that's taking place between Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. And so therefore, Suta Goswami, before describing the story of Maharaj Parikshit, the pastimes of Maharaj Parikshit, which he's starting now, whose story did he describe? Whose appearance did he describe in particular? There's someone that was very important, or the story of whom we were hearing not last time, but a few, 2 or 3 classes before. Parikshit Maharaj is the listener of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Who is the speaker?
Shukadev Goswami.
Yes, Shukadev Goswami. So when there's a great narration, then the speaker, first of all, describes who is the speaker and who is the listener. So he first describes how Shukadev Goswami comes to this world and his greatness and his glory. We know of that story about Shukadev Goswami, how he stayed in the womb of his mother for 16 years. And then Lord Krishna himself came and told him, now you can come out of the womb. You won't fall into Maya. And the moment Shukadev Goswami comes out, he's a young man of 16 years. And he leaves his father's home and he goes to the forest. Why was this important? Because Suta Goswami is relating to us that Shukadev Goswami is a fully liberated soul. The speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam is not an ordinary human being, but is a fully liberated soul, Shukadev Goswami. And now he's glorifying the listener. Well, the greatness of a conversation is known not just by the speaker, but also by the listeners. So if the audience is very astute, then the information that's being given by the speaker will also be very profound. Right? Let's say you have a very profound speaker. Let's say very, very great famous speaker, and you bring him and you put him in front of a class of preschool children. Well, that speaker can obviously inspire those children, but the subject matter will still be very basic because the audience is children. So if something is actually going to be very glorious, both the speaker and the listener need to be properly qualified. And only then will that subject matter be available. And we see this actually in the world scriptures, that one of the reasons the Bhagavatam is such an advanced subject matter is because it's being spoken to sages, to people like we will see, like Maharaj Parikshit. Whereas some other books which are given by the great sages are spoken to people who are not so qualified, and therefore the subject matter is very basic. It doesn't go very deep. So here, Suta Goswami is describing the greatness now of Maharaj Parikshit. And so the narration of Maharaj Parikshit begins long before Maharaj Parikshit. It begins with the story of the Pandavas. Now, Srila Prabhupada often said, or has said, that the Srimad Bhagavatam starts where the Gita ends. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita starts where the Bhagavatam ends. So it's kind of like Gita is bachelor's, he said Bhagavatam is master's, and Chaitanya Charitamrita is our PhD. And this is true in terms of content, that how the Bhagavatam goes deeper and deeper, more than the Gita, but also in terms of storyline. We see that the Bhagavatam starts where the Mahabharata ends, and the Gita is in the Mahabharata, is present in the Mahabharata. So the Bhagavatam is starting when at the end of the Kurukshetra battle, after the war has happened. In relation to the war, when is the Gita spoken? The Bhagavad Gita is spoken before the war, right? Before the battle. Arjuna is being prepared to fight it. And the Bhagavatam is starting at the end of the battle. So here, the scene it's set is that the battle is over and there's just a few warriors left on each side. Srila Prabhupada says the Mahabharata battle was the greatest carnage in the history of the human race. Because when Krishna fights, he does a good fight. So even his battle is going to be very, extraordinary. And Krishna did this to relieve the earth of the burden of all the demoniac forces. So it's also for good cause, but it's a very terrible battle. And on each side, there's just a handful of warriors. So on the side of the Kauravas, there's a few sages left, like Kripacharya, who are also fighting in the battle. Somehow they're drawn in. And there's the son of Dronacharya, who's Ashwatthama. And although Dronacharya was the teacher of the Pandavas and a very great Brahmana, very great sage, his son is very cruel and very hard-hearted. And so after, seeing the death of his father, which was necessary, Krishna ordained it, by the Pandavas, he became very hateful of the Pandavas. And because of bad association, the association of Duryodhana, he became even more influenced. And the demoniac party, um, Dushashana, Karna, all that association also deeply affected his mind. So much so that he became even more heinous than Duryodhana himself, as we will see. And so at the end of the war, he decides that he has to take revenge. This is the demoniac mentality, to take revenge. So he feels that he has to take revenge and somehow, get back at the Pandavas and please his master Duryodhana. So this is where it begins, and now we'll start reading. Miranda, you are first. Please read text 13 and 14, just the translation.
Yes, Prabhuji. When the respective warriors of both camps, namely the Kauravas and the Pandavas, were killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and the dead warriors obtained their deserved destinations, and when the son of Dhritarashtra fell down lamenting, his spine broken, being beaten by the club of Bhishma, the son of Dronacharya, Ashvatthama, beheaded the 5 sleeping sons of Draupadi and delivered the heads as a prize to his master, foolishly thinking that he would be pleased. Duryodhana, however, disapproved of the heinous act, and he was not pleased in the least.
So as his revenge, he went to the camp of the Pandavas at night, and he killed the 5 sons of Draupadi. He was actually intending to kill the Pandavas, but because it was nighttime, they were 5 and these were 5. He mistook the sons of the Pandavas to be the Pandavas, and so he went and he killed them, the 5 children. It was such an inglorious act for a warrior, that you lose the war and then at night you go secretly and while people are sleeping, kill them. And this is one point about revenge, which we will get more to later on, that the devotee of the Lord never engages in acts of revenge. The devotee never acts out of revenge. And Krishna makes this point very, very prominently in the Mahabharata, where he tells the Pandavas, never act out of revenge. Why? Because we must do the right thing, but when we act out of revenge, then more often than not, our anger is directed towards someone who is not the object of our revenge. So he went out to kill the Pandavas, but he ends up killing the innocent 5 children of the Pandavas. Why? Because he's acting out of revenge. We see in these horrible war crimes, right? This is what happens. 2 parties hate each other, and they don't actually end up killing the people who they dislike, the leaders, who are fighting with one another, the controllers of the state. But as you read just recently in the news, they go into a school and they kill small children, because this is the nature of revenge. So a devotee of the Lord never acts out of revenge. We have to think about ourselves, like when someone does something wrong to us, am I acting now? What is my response? Am I acting out of duty? Am I acting out of the instruction of the sages, of Lord Krishna, of the scripture? Or am I acting in revenge? And if we're acting out of feelings of revenge, or if we have feelings of revenge, then the devotee immediately should curb that feeling. Should still act and do the right thing, but do it out of duty under the guidance of the sages, not out of revenge. In the Mahabharata, after Draupadi is insulted in the assembly of the Kauravas, this even modern scholars they describe how the scene of Draupadi being insulted in front of the Kauravas is one of the most disturbing scenes in all of they say Sanskrit literature, because she's this very advanced queen, a very exalted queen, and she's dragged in the assembly by her hair and then ordered by Duryodhana, this evil person, ordered by him to take off her clothes in front of the entire assembly. And when she doesn't do that, then his younger brother, the Shashana, grabs onto her clothes and attempts to disrobe her in front of the entire assembly. And then, of course, as we know the story, she prays to Lord Krishna. And many of you I know are watching the Mahabharata, so you know. Miranda, I'm not sure if you're up to that scene or not. You've seen that, yes? And she prays to Lord Krishna. And because she's such an exalted devotee of the Lord, Krishna makes that sari unlimited, you know, limitless. But they do such a, you know, they call her a prostitute, a whore. They you know, insult the Pandavas. Like, it's just, there's just no end to the you know, evil way in which they treat her. So after this happens, then another gambling match happens, and then the Pandavas are in exile in the forest. And after this happened, then they get exiled. Imagine, it's not even like, okay, they get exiled, but it's like this insult, and then to add injury to the insult, then they get exiled. And Arjuna, Bhima are naturally very, very hurt and disturbed by this. And Arjuna, being a warrior, Bhima being that class, they immediately, you know, they want to take revenge. You know, it's like it's just, but Krishna forbids them to do so. So this is Krishna's example. He tells them that no matter what has happened, do not act out of revenge. And Maharaj Yudhishthira also, as we will see, stops them from doing so. And Bhishma Dev, who is back, you know, now that this has happened, everyone is very unhappy, very nervous also, and afraid, because they know the power of the Pandavas, and they know that now an animosity has been created. Right? This is the difficulty. You know, once, you know, you know, they knew that Duryodhana was creating his own grave, because, you know, to create animosity with a powerful person is not in the, even if a person is evil, it's not in your self-interest, because now that powerful person who is very powerful, it will strike back. But Bhishadev, he mentions in his dialogue, in his words, in his discussion, he says that I know that the Pandavas will never take revenge, because Krishna is with them, and he will forbid them from taking revenge. But they will act out of dharma. They will act out of their duty. And they will fight, but they'll fight only if it is dharma. So very, very powerful message here that's being shown, that how Ashwatthama's acting out of revenge is the antithesis to the devotee's nature, and how Ashwatthama is acting in the demoniac mentality. Although he is a Brahmana and a son of a Brahmana, and you know, he loses his Brahmana position, but he's born in that Brahmana position, he acts in a way that is disapproved even by Duryodhana. So the story continues. Soumya, you can read text 15.
Draupadi, the mother of the 5 children of the Pandavas, after hearing the massacre of her sons, began to cry in distress, with eyes full of tears. Trying to pacify her in her great loss, Arjuna spoke to her thus.
Venkateshwaru, text 16.
O gentle lady, when I present you with the head of that Brahmana, after beheading him with arrows from my Gandiva bow, I shall then wipe the tears from your eyes and pacify you. Then, after burning your son's body, you can take your bath standing on his head.
Text 17. Raj.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I'm sorry if there is a background noise. I apologize for it.
That's
My
okay.
son.
That's okay, no problem.
Arjuna, who is guided by the infallible Lord as friend and driver, thus satisfied the dear lady by such statements. Then he dressed in armor and armed himself with furious weapons, and getting into his chariot, he set out to follow Ashwatthama, the son of his marital teacher.
Rupa Vilas Prabhu, would you like to read text 18?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Ashwatthama, the murderer of the princess, seeing from a great distance Arjun coming at him with great speed, fled in his chariot, panic-stricken, just to save his life, as Brahma fled in fear from Shiva.
Andrew, would you like to read text 19?
When the son of the Brahmana saw that his horses were tired, he considered that there was no alternative for protection outside of his using his ultimate weapon, the Brahmastra, nuclear weapon.
Soumya, you can read text 20.
Since his life was in danger, he touched the water in Sand City and concentrated upon the chanting of the hymns for throwing nuclear weapons, although he did not know how to withdraw such weapons.
Very nice. Text 21. Oh, sorry, I missed you. No. Sham Karuna Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thereupon, her glaring light spread in all directions. It was so fierce that Arjuna thought his own life in danger, and so he began to address Lord Sri Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Miranda Mataji.
Arjuna said, O my Lord Sri Krishna, you are the almighty personality of Godhead. There is no limit to your different energies. Therefore, only you are competent to instill fearlessness in the hearts of your devotees. Everyone in the flames of material miseries can find the path of liberation in you only.
Very nice. Venkatesh Prabhu, text 23.
You are the original personality of Godhead who expands himself all over the creations and is transcendental to material energy. You have cast away the effects of the material energy by dint of your spiritual potencies. You are always situated in eternal bliss and transcendental knowledge.
Raj, text 24.
And yet, though you are beyond the purview of the material energy, you execute the four principles of liberation characterized by religion and so on for the ultimate good for the conditioned souls.
Now, one small comment here that Arjuna is being faced with the Brahmastra weapon. I mean, this is like if an atomic bomb was coming at you. And obviously, therefore, then he's taking shelter of Krishna. And he has a weapon that he can give in return, but he first wants Krishna's permission to use it. But before taking shelter of Krishna, while this weapon is coming in the sky, he's glorifying Krishna, like, as though it's a philosophy class, describing his greatness and his who he is and how he's always situated in eternal bliss. And Srila Prabhupada, and one might ask, well, how is it or why is it that Krishna, when in a time of danger, is taking the time to glorify the Lord before asking him, the Lord, his question? So Srila Prabhupada explains in these purports, he says that a devotee of the Lord always first glorifies the Lord before asking something from the Lord. So this is, you'll find, true of all the saints in the Bhagavatam, that before they approach the Lord, before they say anything to the Lord, they first sufficiently glorify the Lord. And given that Arjuna has less time here, you'll notice it's just like 4 verses. There's one more verse, and then he starts asking this question about this weapon. But he does take the time to say those few verses. So remembering our small position before the Lord, following in the footsteps of the devotees, we have to remember that our duty is not just to pray to the Lord. Like prayer, vandanam, is a very important process in most of the world's religions. In Krishna consciousness, it's also an important process, but still, it's not as important as kirtanam. Right? Vandanam is there, which is prayer, but it comes after kirtanam. And most of our practices are kirtanam, which is just glorification, repeating the name of God, chanting the name of God. Why is that? Because first we want to glorify the Lord. Then once we've glorified, then we can pray to him, ask him for specific things, ask him for guidance. But Krishna is so great that if we just glorify him, he already knows what our problem is and he responds, right? So that's why kirtanam, shravanam and kirtanam is the two most important processes, the first ones that are mentioned in the 9 processes, and then vandanam comes later. And the sages, when they're doing this, it's not just that, the poet added these verses in. No, Arjuna is actually glorifying the Lord in the middle of this battle before speaking to the Lord. So Prabhupada says this in the book. Very nice. Text 25. Who's next? Rupa Vilas Prabhu. Text 25.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thus you descend as an incarnation to remove the burden of the world and to benefit your friends, especially those who are your exclusive devotees and are wrapped in meditation upon you.
Now to text 26. Andrew?
O Lord of Lords, how is it that the dangerous effulgence is spreading all around? Where does it come from? I do not understand it.
I'll read the next one. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Know from me that this is the act of the son of Drona. He has thrown the hymns of nuclear energy Brahmastra, and he does not know how to retract the glare. He has helplessly done this, being afraid of imminent death. O Arjuna, only another Brahmastra can counteract this weapon. Since you are expert in the military science, subdue this weapon's glare with the power of your own weapon." Sri Suta Goswami said, hearing this from the personality of Godhead, Arjuna touched water for purification, and after circumambulating Lord Shri Krishna, he cast his Brahmastra weapon to counteract the other one. When the rays of the two Brahmastra combined, a great circle of fire, like the disk of the sun, covered all outer space and the whole firmament of planets. All the population of the 3 worlds was scorched by the combined heat of the weapons. Everyone was reminded of the Samrataka fire, which takes place at the time of annihilation. Thus, seeing the disturbance of the general populace and the imminent destruction of the planets, Arjuna at once retracted both Brahmastra weapons as Lord Shri Krishna desired. So Arjuna sent the second Brahmastra weapon as a way of then retracting both of the weapons. Ashwatthama knew how to throw the weapon, but he did not know how to get it back. But Arjuna did. So therefore, he did this. Arjuna, his eyes blazing in anger like 2 red balls of copper, dexterously arrested the son of Gautami, Ashwatthama, and bound him with ropes like an animal. After binding Ashwatthama, Arjuna wanted to take him to the military camp. The personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, looking on with lotus eyes, spoke to Arjuna in an angry mood. In the purport to this verse, the Lord Srila Prabhupada describes how the Lord was also in an angry mood, and Arjuna was also in an angry mood. But he's describing how their anger is very different. In the case of Arjuna, when he is angry, his eyes were like red copper balls, right? But in the case of Krishna, his eyes were like still lotus petals. So he was angry, but still his eyes were like lotus eyes. So Srila Prabhupada says this is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. That the Lord, he's unaffected by everything. Although Arjuna is a pure devotee of the Lord, a great devotee of the Lord, but still, even the devotee of the Lord has feelings. And when Arjuna's, due to the pain of losing his children and seeing Ashwatthama being so unjust, so demoniac, you could say in one way, ready to destroy the world with this Brahmastra nuclear weapon, Arjuna is feeling anger, which is very much justified. He's feeling anger towards this culprit, and Krishna's also feeling anger because Krishna does not tolerate offenses to his devotees. So because Arjuna is his great devotee and he's been offended by Ashwatthama, Krishna's also feeling anger. But Krishna's eyes still remain like lotus eyes, and Arjuna's eyes are like red copper balls. Lord Shri Krishna said, "O Arjuna, you should not show mercy by releasing this relative of a Brahmana, Brahma Bandhu, for he has killed innocent boys in their sleep." Krishna here particularly uses the words Brahma Bandhu. It's important to note, Prabhupada points this out. Why? Because he is not a Brahmana. He is simply the relative of a Brahmana. And therefore, he should not be released. A person who knows the principle of religion does not kill an enemy, who is careless, intoxicated, insane, asleep, afraid, or devoid of his chariot. Nor does he kill a boy, a woman, a foolish creature, or a surrendered soul. And as we know, Ashwatthama did this. So therefore, Krishna is saying Ashwatthama does not know the principles of religion. He killed people while they were asleep, and not only that, he killed children. A cruel and wretched person who maintains his existence at the cost of others' lives deserves to be killed for his own well-being, and therefore he will go down by his own actions. Furthermore, I have personally heard you promise Draupadi that you would bring forth the head of the killer of her sons. This man is an assassin, a murderer of your own family members. Not only that, but he has also dissatisfied his master. He is but the burnt remnants of his family. Kill him immediately. So Krishna here is ordering Arjuna to kill him. Imagine the Lord himself. Suta Goswami said, although Krishna, who was examining Arjuna in religion, encouraged Arjuna to kill the son of Dronacharya, Arjuna, a great soul, did not like the idea of killing him, although Ashwatthama was a heinous murderer of Arjuna's family members. And just think about this scene, that this is after the great battle has happened and millions of people have died in that war. Arjuna has fought in that battle and killed so many warriors in that war. But Arjuna does not like the idea of killing Ashwatthama. After reaching his own camp, Arjuna, along with his dear friend and charioteer, Sri Krishna, entrusted the murder unto his wife, who was lamenting for her murdered sons. Sri Suta Goswami said, Draupadi then saw Ashwatthama, who was bound with ropes like an animal, and silent for having enacted the most inglorious murder. Due to her female nature, and due to her being naturally good and well behaved, she showed him due respects as a Brahmana. 43, last one. She could not tolerate Ashwatthama's being bound by ropes, and being a devout lady, she said, release him, for he is a Brahmana, our spiritual master. So, I'll stop here and we'll read the purport to this verse. But any thoughts, any questions up to this point before we read the purport to this verse?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I was reading in this similar chapter, and it was mentioned that like the Pandavas' son were look-alike Pandavas.
Yes.
And while he was sleeping, Ashwatthama thought he was actually killing Pandavas,
Yes.
and he didn't do it thinking that he is killing the children. Is
Yes.
that true? Can you like explain a little bit more on this?
Yes, I was hoping actually someone would ask this question. So they were identified here as children, but the sons of the Pandavas were actually young men, and they actually fought in the battle. But according to Vedic culture, a person is still a child until they actually reach maturity. Like until they're actually mature men, they're still called children. And so therefore here they're referred to as children. They were, probably around the age of 16, 17, 18, and very, very powerful warriors, because they were the sons of the Pandavas, who were, very powerful warriors. So they too were. And, when there's a time of calamity, then all hands on the deck. So normally at that age, they would not have fought, but they did fight. And they were so powerful that they didn't die in the war. They were victorious. But then when Ashwatthama comes to kill the Pandavas, he thinks, because they were also men, and at night you cannot differentiate between facial looks. You just see the size of people, right? So he thought them to be the 5 Pandavas. And when he killed them, then he had the further sin of killing children, while they're asleep. If they had died on the battle, it would have been glorious, but not like this.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu.
Yes.
So I forget what text it was in, but so when Arjuna was trying to console Draupadi, about her sons being murdered, and he said, I promise you, I will bring you his head and you can stand on it up to your bath. So at that point, was it more of a revenge type of a thing at that point? And then Krishna, of course, orders him to kill. Can you talk about that a little bit?
No, actually, it's a very good point that you raised. That question also came to my mind when I read it. That was justice. As a king, it was his duty to bring a criminal to justice, to bring justice to the victim, and to punish the criminal. So that was justice. But Arjuna's treatment of Ashwatthama, once he has been caught, his lack of the urge of just wanting to slaughter him at that time and torture him and kill him in return, that shows that he was not acting out of revenge. So even Hanuman, it was very angry. Prabhupada says there's a place for anger in spiritual life. When a devotee of the Lord, and that devotee could be even your family member, if a devotee of the Lord has been mistreated, then a devotee, not for himself, but for another, will become very angry. And in order to fight, Prabhupada says, one does need anger. One cannot fight without anger. And the devotee warrior, if he has to fight, has to have some anger. But that anger is out of a feeling of dharma and out of feeling of justice, not out of a feeling of revenge. And we will actually discuss this further in the purport. Prabhupada actually explains this very well.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Other questions or comments at this point?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So Lord Krishna spoke to tell Arjuna to fight, and now he's telling now kill. Still Arjuna is back that he's not decided what to do, or maybe he has decided not exactly what Krishna wants here.
Yes, such a nice observation. He spoke the Gita. He told Arjuna, you have to fight, which means to kill, right? To fight. And then Arjuna agrees. And then because Krishna instructs, Arjuna goes and fights. And now Krishna is telling you kill, and Arjuna is not fulfilling the instruction, right? He doesn't fulfill Krishna's order. And the only explanation for this is the explanation of the nature of a devotee. And this is the imperceptible part of a devotee, that the devotee knows the mind of the Lord. Just like someone who is in an intimate relationship with us, it may be a spouse, it may be our parents, they know our mind, right? We're saying something, but they know what's behind it. And that happens only when you have an intimate relationship with someone. So in that case, Arjuna could understand that Krishna is saying, no, I mean it, you should fight. And in this case, Arjuna could understand, as is said right here in text 40, he could understand that Krishna is examining his quality of titikshva, his quality of tolerance. Krishna is examining Arjuna here. How glorious is Arjuna? Because see, Arjuna nor Krishna is the king. Of course, Krishna is the king of all kings. But in this pastime, he is not the king. Yudhishthira is the king. And therefore, the right to administer justice is not with Arjuna, but it is with Yudhishthira, because he is the king. Another very important point that comes through in the Mahabharata. This is why I just love the Mahabharata also, and the Bhagavatam also. Like, so many messages come through. And one of the messages which Yudhishthira and the Pandavas say at different times is that something may be wrong and someone may be wrong, but we must have the adhikar to correct that person. So in different cases in the Mahabharata come where, Bhima, for example, he's punishing Jayadratha, who is very evil, but he stops short of killing him. Why? Because Arjuna stops him and he says, it is the king's right to give justice. Do you have the right or not to give the justice? So such great message for our today's society also, that yes, the wrongdoer is there, but who has the right to punish the wrongdoer? It is the person who's given that role, and that's the king. So Arjuna is not acting out of rashness. Krishna's testing him, that will he act out of fear, out of anger, out of emotion, or will he act in his great role as a devotee? So that is the difference here, that Arjuna knows the mind of Krishna. He knows that Krishna here is testing.
Thank you. Very nice, bro. Is that we have to understand what is Krishna's intention and Krishna's will. Personally, it's very hard. We have to understand through devotees, definitely. Right. So, if you have time, another question is, why Ashwatthama is still surviving? That was my question also. So, if you have time.
That was because of the jewel on his forehead. He had a special benediction. Because see, these powerful people, many of them were demoniac, but they were powerful because they had performed great austerities. So Ashwatthama, similarly, he was also a yogi in one sense. He had performed great austerities, and because of that, he had this benediction, he had this jewel on his forehead, that until he had the forehead jewel, no one could kill him. That jewel had to be first removed from his forehead. And in a battle, how is anyone going to go up to you and get the jewel off of your head? So that's why he was virtually indestructible. And here Arjuna catches hold of him, right? And he could have removed the jewel and then killed him. But as we see later on, he only removes the jewel from his forehead. And this is a big chapter. It's so many points of this. Very hard to talk about all of them. Why specifically he did this as opposed to that, and we're just getting into it. So yeah, but that's why.
Thank you.
So now I'll read the purport to this verse. So this is Draupadi, and again in the Bhagavatam, Draupadi's exalted nature comes through. Which woman in the world, right? Any woman in the world, which woman in the world would offer respect to the killer of her children? Whatever her nature might be, whatever her mindset might be. I mean, even if there's some slight harm to a child, a mother cannot tolerate it. And so here Prabhupada is trying to explain this behavior. She could not tolerate Ashwatthama's being bound by ropes, and being a devoted lady, she said, release him, for he is a Brahmana, our spiritual master. Purport. As soon as Ashwatthama was brought before Draupadi, she thought it intolerable that a Brahmana should be arrested like a culprit and brought before her in that condition, especially when the Brahmana happened to be a teacher's son. Arjuna arrested Ashwatthama, knowing perfectly well that he was the son of Dronacharya. Krishna also knew him to be so, but both of them condemned the murderer without consideration of his being the son of a Brahmana. According to revealed scriptures, a teacher or a spiritual master is liable to be rejected if he proves himself unworthy of the position of a guru or spiritual master. A guru is called also an acharya, or a person who has personally assimilated all the essence of Shastras and has developed his disciples to adopt the ways. Ashwatthama failed to discharge the duties of a Brahmana or teacher, and therefore he was liable to be rejected from the exalted position of a Brahmana. On this consideration, both Lord Krishna and Arjuna were right in condemning Ashwatthama. But to a good lady like Draupadi, the matter was considered not from the angle of Shastric vision, but as a matter of custom. By custom, Ashwatthama was offered the same respect as offered to his father. It was so because generally the people accept the son of a Brahmana as a real Brahmana, by sentiment only. Factually, the matter is different. A Brahmana is accepted on the merit of qualification and not on the merit of simply being the son of a Brahmana. Then this final paragraph, very important. But in spite of all this, Draupadi desired that Ashwatthama be at once released. And it was all the same a good sentiment for her. This means that a devotee of the Lord can tolerate all sorts of tribulation personally, but still such devotees are never unkind to others, even to the enemy. These are the characteristics of one who is a pure devotee of the Lord. So, I mean, the other details and points are there, but only a very exalted person can be so even-minded in such tribulation, like Draupadi, Arjuna, Yudhishthira, the Pandavas are being. So how is it possible that they could be so even-minded? How anyone could be? It's only possible because they are devotees of the Lord. Only if a person actually has very deep realization and deep connection with the Lord can they actually overcome such distress and be able to tolerate such things. One cannot do it artificially. One can do it artificially for a little bit, but one can only do it if one actually has great spiritual depth and experience, great spiritual realization within the heart. And as a devotee, only on that level of consciousness as a devotee can one tolerate all tribulations personally. And in spite of that tribulation, such a devotee is never unkind to others, even to the enemy. These are the characteristics of one who is a pure devotee of the Lord. So what a message here, that that, I mean, personally, when I read this, I was like, what a message, like myself, I was thinking, that this is the quality of a devotee, that how can I practice this, that never to be unkind to others on one's own account. So I was mentioning how the Pandavas, they were fighting in the battle and they're killing so many people. The battle of Kurukshetra was ordained by the Lord, as you know, right? Lord Krishna ordained it. And so it was their duty to fight. But once the fight happened, then this was on their own account, right? In some ways, the battle was over. As in this case, they're thinking that the situation is different. For others, the devotee will fight. For the principle of dharma, the devotee will fight. For the Lord, the devotee will fight. And actually, in a subsequent purport, Prabhupada mentions this, that for the Lord, the devotee will not tolerate even the slightest insult towards the Lord or towards his devotees. But for himself, the devotee tolerates everything, is able to tolerate everything. And that is the message. Because otherwise, it's very bewildering, this whole passage. It almost seems unjust. It seems very odd. How he killed 5 people. At least he should die once, right? He should die actually 5 times. But 5 children he killed. But their thinking, their logic is that this is a tribulation inflicted upon ourselves, and therefore they're being compassionate to Ashwatthama rather than feeling this anger towards him. And it's very interesting that how Draupadi is speaking these words, because earlier in the Mahabharata, we find, as many of you know who have been seeing it, we find that she was actually very angry with the Kauravas. When she was insulted in the assembly, right? We all know when she was insulted in the assembly, then she, after that, demands from her husbands, and particularly Maharaj Yudhishthira, that go and fight with them. They deserve to be punished. Fight with them, and therefore you should bring about justice. And here Draupadi, she is describing, she's saying release him, and she's not showing anger towards Ashwatthama. So I just wanted to read this selection from the Mahabharata, just as because it's very nice to read these Bhagavatam and Mahabharata together. We can appreciate who the Pandavas were. So at that time, when Draupadi is feeling anger towards the Kauravas, and they're in exile, they've been exiled, thrown out of their kingdom, and they're living in a small hut. Then Yudhishthira Maharaj responds to Draupadi's complaints. And Bhima is also complaining. Others are also, they're all there. And so she responds. And he responds in a way that is approved by Lord Krishna. It is also described that how Maharaj Yudhishthira was so exalted that he would never touch the ground when he would walk. He would actually levitate. He was so pure in his heart. And even Lord Krishna touched his feet. That among all the Pandavas, we know that Arjuna is the closest to Krishna. Yet Lord Krishna and also Arjuna glorify Maharaj Yudhishthira for his great qualities. So here Maharaj Yudhishthira, he speaks. And his instruction to Draupadi is that a devotee of the Lord, and also a great person, completely gives up anger. And here again, the context is anger for offenses done to oneself. For the Lord, there's a place for anger. For the devotees, there's a place for anger. But for offenses done to oneself, he's saying one should just completely give it up. He says, only fools praise anger, considering it equivalent to energy. The wise keep anger at a distance. The man consumed by anger does not easily acquire generosity, dignity, courage, skill, or the other attributes possessed by men of character. The wise consider him a man of character who restrains his wrath. The pious always praise such a man because they understand that the forgiving man is always victorious. So another thing that we're finding here is that Draupadi is forgiving Ashwatthama. One who represses his anger, even when antagonized, rejoices in the next world. For this it is said that a wise man, whether strong or weak, and even in difficulty, should always forgive his persecutor. If there were not forgiving persons in this world, chaos would prevail. If kings and other superiors give way to anger, the distressed people would quickly meet with ruin. If inferiors do not tolerate their superiors' admonishments, sin will take root and destroy mankind. I shall cite to you the verse spoken in ancient times by the Rishi Kashyapa. Quote, "Forgiveness is virtue, forgiveness is sacrifice, and forgiveness is the Vedas. Forgiveness is purity and penance. It is truth, piety, religion, and the holy name and the holy Narayan. Through forgiveness, the universe is sustained, and by practicing forgiveness, a man can attain to everlasting regions of bliss." How then can I renounce forgiveness, gentle lady, in which is established spirituality, truth, wisdom, and the three worlds? Both this world and the next belong to the forgiving person. Therefore, forgiveness is considered the highest virtue. So, all of us may have experienced distressful, painful, unfair situations in this world. And we may have these, you could say, these what's sort of the cuts in the heart, the painful memories, the painful feelings in the heart. And one may be wondering, how can I get relief from those things that are paining my heart, that don't leave my heart? And here, Maharaj Yudhishthir and Draupadi in the Bhagavatam are giving that teaching, that solution, that we can gain freedom from those feelings, from those emotions, from those memories by giving up anger and by practicing forgiveness. And that is the highest virtue, that's the highest wisdom, and the whole world is sustained by this. So, and that is the what the devotee is able to do, that is what the non-devotee is unable to do, and the devotee is able to do. And very interesting point here that he's mentioning. In this world, we find superiors and inferiors, right? We find the strong and the weak. So he's saying if the kings and superiors give way to anger, the distressed people would quickly meet their ruin. So those who are stronger, like the Pandavas, like the warriors, right? Those who are stronger, if they give way to anger, then the weaker will get annihilated because they're stronger. And when they get angry, they'll destroy the weak. And if those who are inferior give way to anger towards the superiors, then that will also destroy mankind. Why? Because when the culture of respect is destroyed, when the inferiors cannot tolerate the admonishments, the chastisements of the superiors, then the culture of respect is destroyed, and that destroys mankind. So from both sides, both people, the parents and the children and the parents, the teachers and the students and the teachers, everyone has to practice forgiveness. and giving up anger, which are two things are connected. Because in either way, the world will be destroyed. Either way, that will lead to destruction or ruination. So it's these exalted qualities that the Lord greatly enjoys, that Krishna really admires, and so that is being described here. Any reflections on this point? I know there's a lot. Does Maharaj Yudhishthira's teachings, does Draupadi's teachings seem practical, or you think it's largely impractical? More like you could say a principle, but not something that really can be applied. Rupa Vilaspu, what do you think?
It's fully applicable, Prabhu. I think we are applying everywhere. We are tolerating our leaders, politicians. Our students are tolerating us. Our family members every day tolerate me. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I guess the only difference is that the devotee does it voluntarily, right? We have to do it forcefully. When we do it forcefully, then our mind is very disturbed. Actually, when I read this, the first time I read this in the Mahabharata, this was like such an eye-opener to me. And after that, my own mind became, so much more peaceful, because I could understand, well, this is the supreme, path. In other words, that by keeping that anger only hurts the person who holds the anger. It's like an iron rod, right? It burns the hand of the person who holds the iron rod. So by keeping, one has to give it up anyway. There's no recourse, right? If someone is more powerful than us, especially, like you're mentioning, the politicians, the government leaders, all these things, there's no solution to it. But unless one gives it up, is able to give it up, that same anger causes our own destruction.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I heard recently about Gaur Gopal Prabhuji, Gauranga Prabhuji. And he was in his talk, he was giving me one example that when once when a sage, he was preaching his students, and one person suddenly came and he spat on his face. And then the sage coolly, he just wiped it. Is there anything else you want to do? He thought. He went back. And again he came and he spat the second time. All the students were so disturbed and so annoyed of this action that he was doing to his guru. They wanted to just they wanted to just take an action against him, but the guru stopped him. And the third time when he came, he just fell down on the guru's knees, and he knelt down and he told, "I'm so sorry." So the guru is so forgivable, and he's so he's so polite, and in all aspects he forgives everyone. And in fact, he told that he removed all the anger and poison in that person, and he became a normal and soft spoken person. So forgiveness is so nice, so that it changes the person's mentality. That's what I heard from this story.
Yes,
that was really good. So forgiveness. Yeah.
Yes. No, so I thought when you were describing the story, I thought you were mentioning the story of you're speaking of Srila Prabhupada, because actually a similar incident happened with Srila Prabhupada. Just like, this is the same story that you described, that how one time a person was insulting Prabhupada very much, like being very, very just very rude towards Prabhupada, very insulting, and And then Prabhupada, the disciples, same like you're saying, the students, the disciples, they became very angry. And they just, they wanted to take this person and dump him outside of the temple hall. It was in the temple. It was after the class, during the questioning time. This person stood up and asked Prabhupada, why are you sitting on the seat? He was sitting on the Vyasasan. He says, why don't you sit down with us? And then he started saying, you're so proud and this and that, like in a very disrespectful manner. And Srila Prabhupada then stopped his disciples and he said, no, don't do this. In my past life, I must have offended this person. And so in this life, I'm, he's taking out whatever ill feelings he had towards me. So Prabhupada actually describes that the way the devotee thinks, the devotee psychology, is that even if a dog barks at the devotee, then the devotee thinks that there must be something in me. There's some negative quality in me due to which this dog is barking at me. So therefore the fault still rests with me. Because if I was a self-realized soul, then the dog would be turned into a devotee. But the fact that he's barking at me means that there's something in me that is causing this person to bark. So this is actually why also, I was going to mention this point, the devotee can give up anger and be forgiving, is because the devotee sees the perpetrator as the instrument of his karma. He doesn't see the perpetrator as the cause of his karma, or you could say the cause of his suffering. The devotee only sees the perpetrator as the instrument of his suffering. Right? So he's just the instrument, he's just the via media. I'm due this anyway, but this suffering is just coming through this person. So yeah, that is the vision of the devotee, that whatever happens, the devotee thinks that that it must be something in, generally, all situations are different, but in this example that you've given, the devotee feels that there's something in me that is disturbing this person about me. So this is getting purified by this. I actually, another example of this, my own Guru Maharaj, there was once a person living in the Delhi temple, and this person was like half mad. Like he was a nice person, but he was just crazy. So one day, he got really angry about something, got very disturbed. Someone had, disturbed him, and in some situation had really disturbed him in the temple. And so in his crazy mind, he somehow decided that my Guru Maharaj, Gopal Krishna Goswami, he was the cause of his distress, because he was a leader in some way. So he was the culprit on account of the fact that he was a leader. And so he very sad. He went and when my Guru Maharaj was standing there, he physically slapped him on the face. I wasn't there when this happened, but the devotees told me. So he slapped him on the face, and this was like a physical offense, like very badly. It was Maharaj's face was red for a few days after that. It wasn't like he was actually sort of assaulted him. And immediately, the devotees around and everyone were just ready to beat this person to pulp. But again, that Vaishnava example was there. Maharaj stopped him, and he stopped them, and he said, "Don't retaliate physically with him. You obviously take him out, and he could no longer stay in the temple, but don't physically retaliate with him." Where someone else would have enjoyed seeing him beaten a bit, especially if a person is a position of power, they would have enjoyed seeing their followers take him and give him a good thrashing. But the devotee immediately said, no, don't do that, because again, same feeling that here Prabhupada in this purport, he's saying this is such a powerful sentence, Prabhupada's sentence at the end. He says, but still such devotees are never unkind to others, even to the enemy. So even if we identify someone as the enemy, the devotee is not unkind to anyone. So a very glorious message that we can always keep as a guiding kind of a guiding message in our life. And actually, Mataji, you shared that in the YouTube of Maharaj, who spoke to our group. And that question was there, right? He said, the question that was asked, I really liked that you shared it on the WhatsApp group. The question was asked, well, how can I be nice to people? We want to be nice to people, but what if that person is not nice to me? And then Maharaj's response was, well, that is that person's business. But our business is to be like a Vaishnava always, a devotee of the Lord always. Anyone else have any other comments, thoughts, reflections? Andrew, do you have any thoughts on this? Venkatesh Prabhu, do you have any thought?
No, Prabhu, no.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll end now. Thank you very much for your association and for being with us today. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
You done
Prabhuji,
with
once
translation?
again, one last Prabhuji, we all want to wish Sita a happy birthday.
Oh,
Happy birthday,
Oh.
Sita. Happy birthday.
oh,
Happy
where's Sita?
birthday,
Happy birthday to
Sita.
Sita.
Happy
Happy
Krishna
birthday.
conscious birthday.
Happy birthday, Sita.
You can put her on video, Devi Murthy, if you want.
Yeah. Aww.
Hi.
Is it today, Prabhuji?
Sita.
Aditi, you want to say happy birthday? Come. Say happy birthday, Sita.
Happy birthday. Thank you.
So we sing happy birthday?
Happy birthday, Sita. Happy birthday, Sita. Thank you. Happy birthday, Sita.
Today is her lunar birthday. She was born on the Shara day, so that's why today is her lunar birthday.
She'll be 4 years, Prabhuji.
3 years.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Ah.
thank you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Sita.
Hare
You
Krishna.
want to talk with me?
Bye.
Bye, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji. God
Krishna.
bless.
Hare Krishna.